Monday morning, everyone. A little tired there. Carrie Champion, first take.
It's Monday.
I know. I should have more energy. Apologies. Skip Bayless to my left. Good morning. Stephen A. Smith to my right.
What's up? What's up? How y'all doing?
We're doing
What's going on,
well.
Big Time?
How are you?
I'm good.
Are you excited? Because we got a lot to talk about today.
We got a lot
It was
to
a
talk about.
great weekend.
It was a great weekend. Coming up on the show, preseason has left a few teams with more questions than answers at quarterback. For one, is RG3 the right choice in D.C.? We will discuss. Plus, is it true that Michael Vick opted for the backup position to avoid any controversy? That is something we shall debate. But first, let's get to it. This was the penalty that consumed our preseason weekend. Broncos, Texans, they practiced all week together. So by the time they actually had a chance to get to game time, they were very familiar with one another, perhaps too familiar for Peyton Manning, who received his first penalty flag of his career for taunting. Consider that after he exchanged a few words with Texans safety DJ Swearinger.
NFL is the NFL. I mean, the rules are the rules. I led with my shoulder. That's the only thing I could do. I mean, he's a short guy. I mean, I led with my shoulder. And, I mean, the results were the results, and that's all I could do on that play. Peyton was mad. He gave me some choice words before, that on that play. And then, he just came and, said something to me afterwards, some choice words. But, I leave it at that. Peyton say what he want to say, man. It really doesn't matter. All that I care about is the W.
Concerned about West and, never like seeing him coming out of the game, with a potential blow to the head. He had, one of those last year that, kept him out for a while. So I was concerned about him. And, 15 yards with 5 seconds left in the half. It can't hurt you that much, right?
Texan safety DJ Swearinger hit Welker in the head with his shoulders as Welker put his head down to catch the ball. Welker diagnosed with his third concussion within the year. Skip Bayless, whose side are you on?
Stephen A. Smith. I am completely on DJ Swearinger's side, on Bill O'Brien's side on this. And I thought Peyton Manning was not only out of bounds, but obviously way, way out of character to run all the way to the end zone after his get-even touchdown pass from 29 yards on the next play and give Swearinger a face-to-face piece of his mind. I did not get that, and I was a little embarrassed for Peyton in that regard. DJ Swearinger's hit was not dirty. It was not a cheap shot, and I have no idea, just me, I have no idea how you can penalize him for that hit. Because remember, Wes Welker is so quick and so small, they list him at 5'9", I'm not sure he's 5'8",
right.
That at the last split second, as he often does, he ducked his head into a dangerous spot. And so DJ Swearinger wasn't aiming to hit him in the head. DJ Swearinger got him with obviously his shoulder and his forearm because I don't know what else he could have hit him with. Unless he tried to avoid a collision, unless he tried not to tackle Wes Welker, I don't know what else he could have done to avoid hitting Wes Welker in the head. And I'm here to tell you, the running backs now have a rule that they can't lead with their head. Well, maybe Wes Welker needs to have that rule applied to him just to save him from himself, because DJ Swearinger wasn't head hunting. He didn't try to give him a concussion. Wes Welker put his head in harm's way. At the last split second, I don't know what else DJ Swearinger could have done as a football player. Again, if they want to play touch, that's fine. Let's just rule it a touch football game. But it's still tackled the last time I looked, and I thought that was a clean hit, even by the new interpretation of the rules.
Well, I'm incredibly disappointed with your position because I completely agree with you, and I thought that you were going to be foolish enough to sit there and say Peyton Manning had a point. That's what I was coming in here looking forward to this morning. I really thought that you were going to be foolish enough to say that Peyton Manning was absolutely in the right. And clearly DJ Swearinger was absolutely in the right, and I couldn't agree with you more. He did not lead with his helmet or his head. He leaned with his shoulder, and on top of it all, Wes Welker is a miniature receiver, not to mention the fact that he sort of, scringed a little bit and ducked and what have you. I thought it was a perfectly legitimate hit. I thought that the foul called, the penalty called against Swearinger was not legit at all.
Thank you.
But I will tell you this. Here's what I do like about it. I like three things about it. Number one, I like the fact that Peyton got in somebody's face. It's good to see him that fiery, because
that was the first time.
He's just a paragon of virtue for crying out loud. The first penalty, please, first unsportsmanlike penalty is unbelievable. It was good to see. The flip side to it, however, is that I think that watching Wes Welker suffer that concussion and Peyton being so sensitive to it, it just epitomizes why they're not the Super Bowl champions right now. The Denver Broncos offensively are a relatively soft team. Now, I'm not going to accuse Demaryius Thomas or Julius Thomas of being that way, but when you are suffering from absentee status because we couldn't find you, well, Demaryius Thomas showed up. We couldn't find the Eric Deckers of the world who's now in New York. We couldn't find Wes Welker and guys like that. You just see when Peyton reacts that way, it's just a message to defenders around the league. If you get physical with the Broncos, you can rattle them. That's point number 2. But point number 3 is that the media, the fourth estate, that's usually front and center on a bevy of issues, if not practically all of them, needs to be front and center on this one. We need to come to the defense of defensive players in the NFL. Yes, we want to see more offense. We want to see excitement. We want to be entertained. All of those things are true. But we don't want it to occur at the expense of flagrant unfairness to defensive players in the NFL. To call a penalty against DJ Swearinger for a hit like that, you're essentially, you're jeopardizing the NFL as we know it in terms of, what is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do? Basically what the NFL is saying is we want you to tackle people, but we don't want you to hit them. Okay. Wrap your arms around them and get them to the ground, but gently. Make sure. It's tantamount to just picking a baby up and placing them in a crib. That's what the NFL appears to want an NFL football field to be, like a crib. Just grab the baby, the offensive player, and just lay them down gently, and don't harm them. This is what you're preaching when you penalize a defender for making that kind of hit that
as you've made the case many times on the show, they do have long-term liabilities, legal liabilities that they need to now be aware of, more aware of. But to Peyton's credit here, I want to point out these teams, as you pointed out to start off this question, they did practice against each other. And on Wednesday in an 11-on-11 drill, Peyton was intercepted by DJ Swearinger, and Peyton seemed to believe that DJ celebrated a little too loudly and proudly, just a little bit too loudly and proudly for Peyton's taste at this point in Peyton's career and at this point in this young man's career. So I think he was a little raw from that still. And I got to give Peyton props for one thing. It was big time to get upset about Welker and on the very next play, call the play that you thought would burn that defense for a touchdown, and he pumps left and then goes right to Emmanuel Sanders, who looks like he's poised to have a monster year.
Yes, he is. He looked pretty damn good.
All right, but he made a heck of a catch on a heck of a throw for a touchdown, which allowed Peyton then to run the 35 yards or what it was from the pocket to get in Swearinger's face. I give Peyton that because that was like, hey, watch this.
Respect me.
Yeah. So I give you that. But
everybody respects Peyton Manning, and he's one of the greatest of all time, and he's class personified. So anything that would deviate from that will raise a few eyebrows. But in the end, I think more paramount than anything else is that this is Wes Welker's, third concussion? And within a year, and he's a guy that, listen, me, I'm a fan of Wes Welker. I didn't want to see him leave New England. I thought New England should have taken care of him. I certainly felt more for him than Danny Amendola, who I respect in terms of his skill, but has no durability whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. But in the end, when you get stomped, beat down, and punked, the way that the Denver Broncos, the Denver Broncos bum rushed, got bum rushed in the Super Bowl by Seattle. In a preseason game, you take a hit and you're reacting like that for something that was clearly legal in my mind. I'm telling you right now, that's a bad sign for the Denver Broncos, because if I'm a defender in the NFL, I'm looking at the Denver Broncos and I'm saying, this is how you play them. Because Peyton Manning is too elite. The way to rattle him is to rattle his receivers.
Okay. Now, last quick point, just to remind Peyton of this. Little Wes Welker is not exactly a little angel when it comes to some hits that he initiated. Do I have to remind people about the AFC Championship game?
Roll the video, please.
Can we see it,
please?
Just for
there it is. Okay.
Stop it.
And what did Bill Belichick, the great Bill Belichick, say right after the game?
Issue.
It was a deliberate play by the receiver to take out Aqib Talib.
You know
he
what?
also said it was one of the worst plays I've ever seen. Bill Belichick.
But in America, on national television, you have somewhat, regardless of what you may believe, Skip Bayless, you do have an obligation to be completely forthcoming. Yes, the play is accurate that you pointed out, but you're pointing it out because you're still sour over the fact that New England lost the AFC Championship game.
I'm very wrong. I am. Well, I think that's what you're doing. It's an objective point. But if Payton's going to defend Little West, if he's going to defend him on this,
it's not objective.
Yes, it is objective.
It's not objective.
Is Wes a little angel here? No, he's not.
Terry Champion, hold on. Hold on.
Come on.
We are sitting here on national television to open the show, and for a preseason game and a hit, you are bringing up the AFC Championship.
I am.
And you're going to call that objective?
Yes.
You're going to call that objective?
Extremely objective.
Such a lie. That is such a lie.
You have to factor in a man's track record of character or lack thereof.
It's not objective. That's all I mean. At least admit that you're not being objective.
If you're over there. Well, wait a second. You're not objective either. Who are you bullish on this preseason? The Denver Broncos. Do you think they're going to win the AFC? I think you think they're going to win the AFC. Am I right?
Actually, I haven't made my decision yet.
But you have said before.
Said keep your eyes on the New England Patriots because I might pick them over Denver.
Would it change your opinion if you lost Wes Welker to this potential concussion right now?
Well, no, it wouldn't because he'll be back. It's just a concussion.
Well, you don't know that. I don't know.
He'll be back from the concussion.
Well,
he'll be back.
But you had to bring his character into question. That's all you were doing, objectively.
You have to because he might have hurt his own head going after Aqib Talib. Maybe that subjected him to a potential concussion.
Who knows?
Just for the record.
Okay, just for the record. Let's move on, shall we?
While
Peyton Manning is issuing verbal hits, RG3 continues to take a few of himself. He struggled against the Ravens. He was 5 for 8 with only 20 yards and an interception. RG3 sacked 3 times the Redskin great Joe Theismann on RG3. Let's stop beating around the bush. Kirk Cousins has played much better at the quarterback position than Robert Griffin III has. Now Robert is learning to work out of a pocket. He doesn't look as smooth or as comfortable throwing the football. I mean, your eyes will tell you everything you need to know. It's going to be a decision that Jay Gruden is going to have to make. Right now, Robert Griffin III is his quarterback. Now, if there was a quarterback competition, it wouldn't be a competition. Kirk Cousins would be the man I believe he would have to go with, because of the efficiency with which he has run the offense. Okay, his take, no chaser there, guys. Stephen, I'll give this one to you. You agree with him?
Pretty much. Because he didn't say that it is. He said that if there was, as if it should be, based on their performance in the preseason. And I think that anybody with 2 eyes that work halfway decently would see that Kirk Cousins has outplayed RG3 in the preseason. That's not to say he's better than RG3, because I certainly don't believe that. But he has played better this preseason. As an aside, I just respect the hell out of Joe Theismann and what he says about the sport of football. I listen to because he's incredibly candid and honest about what he feels. And I've always been a fan of his. So it's good to see you, my man. I miss you. But here's the deal. When I look at the Redskins and I look at RG3 and the way he's performed in this preseason, I don't see somebody that looks 100% healthy. Now, RG3, in fairness to him, made sure he had somebody reach out to me to ensure that his knee is fine. It was just a thigh bruise from a couple of weeks back. We understand that. But I saw him getting chased out the pocket over the weekend, Skip Bayless. I saw him being unable to evade some of those corners and some of those speed linebackers. And I'm looking at it from the perspective that RG3, the scrambler, the speedster, doesn't seem to have that breakaway speed right now. And he certainly doesn't have his accuracy within the pocket. Now, I'm going to trust Jay Gruden, who says that he's making progress, that don't get caught up in what you're seeing in the preseason. We know what we're doing here, and we're pleased with what RG3 is doing. We're pleased with the progression that we're witnessing. But the problem is, how do you ignore Kirk Cousins? Now, when Kirk Cousins had his opportunity to be in the starting lineup for the Redskins, it didn't pan out so greatly. His numbers weren't so great. He certainly wasn't the most productive person in the world. But watching this dude stand in the pocket and fling this football, if I'm the St. Louis Rams, I get on the phone and I call the Washington Redskins about Kirk Cousins. I can tell you that much. If I'm the Washington Redskins, whereas I don't sit there and label it a quarterback controversy, the leeway, the latitude that I've given to RG3 in the past, even albeit under a different regime, I'm not sure I'm going to give him that latitude now. I'm fresh off a 3-13 season. I have to move forward. We certainly can't have a replica of it last year. And I've got loved ones in D.C., man, that say this, and they're diehard Washington Redskin fans. And they say this: they're done with giving, a pass to they're not done with RG3, but they're done with giving him a pass. Mm-hmm. He has to show up, and he has to play. And this preseason, he has been outplayed by Kirk Cousins. It is that simple. Now, Kirk Cousins isn't going to do it against first units. He's going against second units. No. But he has looked really good and accurate in the pocket compared to what RG3 has looked like.
Boy, this is a tough one for me. I work closely with Joe Theismann on a show on this network for many years, and I have lots of respect for his opinions and his courage to express his opinions, though I often disagreed with him and still disagree on this one. Mm-hmm. My first point is, you almost touched on it, was you remember that Kirk Cousins got 3 starts at the end of the year last year.
That's right.
What did you see in those 3 starts?
That's right.
I didn't see a starting quarterback.
Neither did I.
That's the truth.
Neither did I.
I saw a guy play pretty well against Atlanta. He had 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. I thought he was below par against Dallas and gave Tony Romo a chance to win, even as he hurt himself at the end of the game at Washington. That was 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions.
Okay.
Last start against the Giants, no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So he ended up in the 3 starts, 4 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And his QBR fell way below the 50% mark, which is the average mark in QBR. He was 45-3 against the Cowboys and then 5.5 against the Giants in the last game. It's just not good enough. Yep. He's not RG3.
I agree.
As simple as that.
I agree.
Now, as much as I love RG3, as much as I've supported RG3, I must admit to you, it tore me up to watch him play so miserably on Saturday night. Mm-hmm. My attention was a little torn because I was watching Brian Hoyer also stink it up for the Cleveland Browns. But that's a whole other topic. We're not going to talk about that. And I also watched Tony Romo get sacked about what seemed like 19 times.
We're not bringing that up either.
We're not even going to do that.
The Cowboys gave up 200 yards rushing and over 600 yards. We're not going to do that to them.
We're not going to talk about how woeful the Dallas Cowboys, that it's even worse than I thought it was.
Absolutely. We're not going to talk about that today. We're not going to do it.
Now, seriously, back to business. I'm concerned for RG3. Right. In fact, I'll go another step. I'm scared for him.
That's fair.
I don't like what I saw. I really haven't liked what I've seen the whole preseason. The numbers are hit and miss kind of numbers. And as you point out, Jay Gruden keeps saying, well, if you could see him in practice. Well, I haven't seen him practice. And I only care about what I see, especially in the dress rehearsal preseason game 3.
Right.
And it was nightmarish because I saw the RG3 we kept seeing last year, not the RG3 who won Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. I saw no flash of that RG3 in this game on Saturday night. I'm concerned, Stephen A. Last week, he went after the doubters on Twitter, which showed me that he's more concerned about the doubters than how he's performing at this point. He's being insecure. He's letting them get to his psyche. And then he's putting too much pressure on him when it's time to perform, even in a 3rd preseason game. And he's stinking it up once again. And this time, you have no excuse. I think he is healthy. I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't see a health issue. And I hope I'm right about that.
Not a physical health issue.
Not physical, but maybe mental. Exactly. It could be destroyed confidence. His confidence is still on IR.
I don't see the same speed.
I don't know. I just don't know. But now you have no excuses. You got your weapon. You got Deshaun. Your defense is now healthy and upgraded with a coordinator that you pointed out is now unshackled, right? Is that coordinator, if after last year, Haslett is unshackled, so he can coach the way he wants to coach, and I love the way they're flying around on defense. So, as Robert said after the game, We're going to go as I go.
Right.
Well, okay, you're making it about you, but that's in a good way because that's the truth. That's the harsh truth.
Here's my issue with RG3 in his present situation right now. You clearly didn't have an ideal relationship with Mike Shanahan. I don't blame RG3 for that as much as other people do because I happen to know that Mike Shanahan really didn't want him, wasn't willing to trade up for him, was willing to stay where they were and grab Ryan Tannehill. You RG3, you know this. You walk into the situation, and, you know, just in an uncomfortable way. All right, when you got drafted. So Mike Shanahan is gone. All right, Kyle Shanahan is gone. You've got Jay Gruden that's been brought into the mix now. You've got a guy that knows a thing or two about coaching quarterbacks, okay? So what do you have? Not only do you have that, but they go out there. There's still Alfred Morris running the ball in the backfield, along with Alou. You've got this dude Reed at your tight end.
You love it.
You've got, you know I love Jordan Reed. Then you went and you got Deshaun Jackson and Andre Roberts to add to Pierre Garçon and Santana Moss. So you've got a running attack. You've got incredibly capable receivers. The offensive line is considered and deemed relatively decent compared to what it once was. All right. And a defense that's wreaking havoc.
It is.
All right. And giving you opportunities to win football games. And it seems like everything has been set. The table has been set for you to simply do what they drafted you to do. I understand it's just preseason. I understand you're going against the first team and Kirk Cousins is going against the second team. You cannot be so flagrantly outplayed by Kirk Cousins in the preseason. It's one thing to say, again, I did not see a starting quarterback with all three losses, Atlanta, Dallas, New York Giants, for Kirk Cousins at the end of the season. I did not see a starting quarterback either. But we all know that the Redskins had nosedive, and there was a lot of, ancillary things going on, and it just went from there. What I look at with RG3 is, how are you playing? And right now, I don't see that. I know he's better than Kirk Cousins, but that ain't the question. The question is he playing better? And the answer is an emphatic no.
Okay, that's fair. So now, if in fact Robert does not play in Thursday night's final preseason game, and they say he won't, that means the pressure mounts exponentially for opening Sunday at Houston Texans.
Did
you win that game?
And Clowney coming at him.
You got it.
I think they can win the game because Houston doesn't seem to have a strong offense. But
the Washington quarterback better play at a fairly high level.
RG3 said after the game, people will overreact. Obviously, that's because expectations have been set, so people will overreact, even though it is preseason. 49ers field is not their only problem, guys. Chargers, 49ers, San Diego defense clearly dominated the offensive line. San Francisco didn't score until the second quarter. And now, despite their 21-7 win over the Chargers, the 49ers were outscored in their first two preseason games, 57-3. Both the quarterback and the coach acknowledged the offense is not executing plays.
Productive plays, execution. Had some plays that were cleanly blocked. We had some passes thrown and caught, and the runners were seeing the holes. Just all 11 playing together in a more precise way. I thought it was better today. Good week of practice. Was confident that it was going to be better this week because of the way our guys worked during this past week.
We have some things to improve on before we get to the season.
Such as?
Execution. I mean, we have good plays, just didn't execute.
Colin, just as he is. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you about Colin and the 49ers offense? That is the question. Stephen A., for you.
Well, I'm incredibly concerned because their offense is going to determine whether or not these guys are going to have a legitimate shot to go to the Super Bowl. We're assuming Navarro Bowman and those boys, he's going to be back healthy eventually. We're hoping that will happen. Aldon Smith, you're hoping that, once he comes back that he'll be able to give you some kind of contribution. Alex Boone is a holdout on the offensive line, so obviously that has something to do with how their line has looked, even though Lapati and others could have looked better, Looney as well. But for me, I guess what I look at and I'm saying this, certainly you have to buffer your offensive line to make sure you protect Colin Kaepernick. But why is there an emphasis of that, Skip? The emphasis is on that because Colin Kaepernick isn't perceived as being the most accurate thrower in the world. You see, you look at him and what you marvel at is his athletic ability, his game-changing ability, the fact that he can make plays with his feet as well as his arms. There are times where he looks lights out throwing a football, and there are other times it's not the case. So you've got to be able to develop some level of consistency. And if that consistency is not there, for whatever the reason, you've got a problem. But especially if you don't have the ability to protect them. Because if you need to improve your accuracy as a passer, the number one issue facing you is to have the time to throw. So you can sit there, plant your feet, set up in the pocket, and fling that football. And since the 49ers have shown an inability to do that thus far in this preseason, you're going to have some problems. Not to mention the fact that because of the division that you're in, Arizona is coming. Okay, Seattle is already there. With that reality staring you in the face, you can ill afford to start off slow, start off with struggles and what have you, and think that you're just going to make up for it on the back end. This division is too good to give away games during the NFL season. And San Francisco has given us the impression that they're doing exactly that. And the last point I'd like to make is this. I can't believe I'm saying this. Blaine Gabbert has looked good this preseason. Not just yesterday. He's looked good, Skip, compared to Colin Kaepernick. Blaine Gabbert. Yesterday. I meant yesterday. I'm sorry. I shouldn't go the week before because you're right. But yesterday, he looked better than Colin Kaepernick. And I'm just saying.
Now, that's a mouthful you just said.
Yeah, how about that?
That's scary.
That's a problem.
Okay,
that's a problem.
Okay, if I make you go scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you as a guy who's backed the 49ers?
I'm not going to be. I'm concerned in terms of being concerned about San Francisco going to the Super Bowl or being Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm very concerned. You know why? Because I think one could easily argue that the New Orleans Saints, based on their talent and their schedule, have a better chance of upending Seattle than San Francisco does right now.
So you would go to what, 6, 7 on that scale?
About 7.
Okay. I'm going to an 8 on the concern scale today because I got to tell you, bottom line, it's been almost a dead heat over which quarterback has looked worse, RG3 or Colin Kaepernick. Because I think they're kind of in the same boat. Seriously.
Yeah.
Have you seen any flashes of Colin Kaepernick where you said, wow, there he is?
Nothing.
And by the way, he had long stretches last year that throwing the football, he was not very good. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Okay. That game at Green Bay against your guy, the bad man that is Aaron Rodgers.
That's right.
Colin won that game with his legs as much as his arm. He made some nice throws in the game. It was freezing cold, obviously, but he ran the football and made huge, crucial time plays that had to be made at that time with his legs. Well, can he still do? I assume he can still do that. Maybe he shut that part of his game off for the preseason. Right. Maybe they're just working on his footwork and his passing, which again was off yesterday, and I don't know why, because all of his receivers played. He had his full complement.
Yeah.
He even had Stevie Johnson, who they've added. But he had Vernon Davis, and he had Crabtree, and he had Bolden, and it wasn't clicking. Now, he did not have Alex Boone, who's holding out still and is arguably, you could say, maybe one of his best offensive linemen. But they could go in the opener with 2 offensive line starters who have never started a game in the NFL. I think their corners are below average, so that's a concern to me. And Bowman, as you pointed out, I don't know what his timetable is to get back, so that's a concern. So all of a sudden, I look at this team, and I look at Seattle. Seattle is now head and shoulder pads above this team and everybody else, including the New Orleans Saints. It looks over to me, and I don't usually say that, but I put more stock in the preseason than you usually do, especially the third week, but even the body of work. I ignored what the signs were screaming at me last year about Seattle.
I tried to tell you about what Seattle was going to do to your boy Cutler, but that's the subject.
Okay, well, we're going to do that. We get to do that. Yeah, I can't wait for that. You want to just do it right now? I'll just do it right now. No.
Wait,
all right, here's my point.
Tease that, because I can't wait.
Last year, at this time, last summer, Seattle was annihilating teams, including the Denver Broncos, 41-10 or whatever it was. And I said, well, it's just No, it's not just the preseason.
So now,
they're showing you what's coming, and they're showing you again what's coming. The Seattle Seahawks are showing you that they're at least as good as they were last year because their offense looks even a little better without Golden Tate. We'll get into more of that in just a little bit. But my point is in the perspective of the 49ers, this is trouble, man. because Carson Palmer looked awful last night on national TV. So I'm not sure Arizona is coming.
I'm so surprised.
Okay, well, I'm not sure. And we know Sam Bradford is now gone.
He's a home run hitter, though.
Okay, what?
Carson Palmer is like Mark McGwire or Dave Kingman, for crying out loud. He's going to hit home runs, he's going to strike out. That's what he does. That's what Carson Palmer does. So I wouldn't rule out Arizona because Carson Palmer is going to lose about 2 or 3 games for you this year.
Well,
but he'll win a few, too, with Fitzgerald and those boys.
Okay, but they lost Darnell Dockett and they lost Darrell Washington, 2 cornerstones of their run defense.
That's fair. That's
big.
Okay.
All right, so I look at this division, which was going to be the toughest division in pro football.
Seattle.
And without Sam Bradford, I don't know about that. Well, it looks like Seattle could sweep this division.
It may be.
All right.
Seriously.
Might be something we're discussing, too, later on in the show.
Yeah.
All right. Gentlemen, I hear from Deontay. He says there's really no reason to worry for one Colin Kaepernick. His preseason numbers were the same as they were last season, and he still led them to the NBC championship.
But the thing about it is everything's going wrong with San Francisco, not just because of the talent.
Not just him.
Even the field. The field stinks.
Okay, but real quick, I'm
sorry.
Go
ahead, add to it.
This is laughable to me. Do you realize how bad the Candlestick Park field was year after year? It was muddy and awful. It was a joke. It was the worst field in the league. And now you're complaining about your new field?
Because you built a $1.2 billion stadium. You're hoping those problems don't reoccur.
But I would think you want a bad field for home field advantage.
$1.2 billion, and you can't get a good field?
You got to resod, do it all over.
Come on, that's just pathetic.
It's been 25 years since Pete Rose received his lifetime ban by the late Bart Giamatti. Since then, no commissioner has even come close to lifting the ban. And when new commissioner Rob Manfred takes over, it doesn't appear like anything will change. Our reporter Jeremy Schaap joins us now to help answer the question, is there pressure to keep Pete Rose out of baseball? First and foremost, thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure.
It is a
Welcome back.
Good
to see you. Always good to see you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you realize, Carrie, once upon a time, going way back to our New York days, he actually sat in your chair for a couple of days?
That is correct.
Yeah. Nope, you're good.
All right, so Jeremy, here's a question. Help us understand, is there pressure to keep him out of baseball?
Well, I think it depends how you define pressure. I think the pressure is internal more than external. I think that Bud Selig, on his way out the door, is unlikely to make a sentimental gesture. For 22 years, there's been absolutely no reason to believe that Bud Selig wants to forgive Pete Rose, that he wants to set a precedent of taking him off the permanently ineligible list. When Rob Manfred comes in, why would he want to send the message that he's going to be soft on Pete Rose? Now people will say, they've got to keep him on the ineligible list to maintain the deterrent effect. Of course, if you've been out of the game for 25 years, I think that's a pretty big deterrent. I don't think that's so much a concern as it's just the way it looks. What do they have in their interest in taking him off the ineligible list? You always have to look for what do they get out of it. We know what Pete Rose would get out of it, but what would Manfred or Selig, how would they possibly benefit by putting him back in the game?
PR. A lot of people do love Pete, right?
Yeah.
But there's not enough, I don't think.
No, I don't see, in Cincinnati it would be a wildly popular move. I think a lot of people say forgive and forget, give him a second chance. Yeah. It's been 25 years. It cost him tens of millions of dollars, his reputation, etc. But, he didn't only break the rule, as we know. He lied about it for 15 years afterwards, not to mention 3 years before that, and while he was doing it. Everybody knows in every clubhouse, Rule 21 is up there. This is something you cannot do. And people forget the details. He wasn't only gambling on the Reds, but those bets were backed by organized crime. And that's where these things get very dangerous for baseball.
Well, for me, I've always been a supporter of Pete Rose being reinstated into the game of baseball, because the argument that I make is that everything that you're talking about that he did was as a manager of the Cincinnati Reds. As a player, he's the all-time hits leader. He's one of the greatest players. I believe he has...
So you mean put him in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm saying put him in the Hall of Fame. That's the first order of business, I believe. I'm wondering...
That's different from reinstating.
Yeah, that's right. And reinstatement to me speaks to forgiveness. How come that doesn't factor into the equation with some of these people associated with baseball?
He signed a document agreeing to be permanently ineligible from the game.
But also on that document, correct me if I'm wrong, he does have the right to,
as everyone who is made permanently ineligible had the right, but to have it reviewed every year, or to appeal every year for reinstatement. But he signed the document so that they wouldn't dig further into his crimes and misdemeanors. His lawyer signed off on it. It was clear to just about everyone in the world except Pete Rose that this meant not only a lifetime ban, but he's on the ineligible list after he dies. Joe Jackson is on the ineligible list.
I completely disagree with your position on this. Banned for life meant banned for life. You can forgive him if you want, but you can't forget this, and you can't go back on it. You can't rescind this. It's too important to the sport. Bud Selig's constant refrain is, a sport without integrity is not a sport. You can talk all you want about PEDs, but this is going across a line you cannot cross. The 1919 Black Sox scandal nearly took down the sport of baseball. And up from those ashes came really, this was, it started the office, that's right. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, right? And from that point on, these commissioners have tried to uphold the power of that position. And in this case, because, look, he did sign away no formal reporting on this. So there was more. This was the tip of the iceberg that hit the public here. And we can go on and on about the Dowd report and what might not have been in there. Now, John Dowd thereafter was quoted in some interviews as saying that he suspected that Pete bet as a player on games for and against his team, but then others have refuted that. I don't know what your findings are on that part.
It's vague. I've never heard anyone suggest that he bet against the Reds.
Okay.
But who knows? I mean, one thing to bear in mind here, one of the interesting facets of this, if Pete had said at the time, and maybe it was a different world back in 1989, if he had said, I have a sickness, I am an addict, which is what we hear from people in trouble now all the time. You know, they're alcoholics, they're sex addicts. If he had said, I'm a gambling addict, and many people will tell you that was what Pete was, that he had a sickness, an addiction. If he had thrown himself on the mercy of Bart Giamatti, who was a very humane person, who would die a week after handing down the ruling, if he had told John Dowd, look, I see you've got me here, there's no way out, help me, he would have been back in the game a long time ago.
My response to that would be, gentlemen, ladies, the very fear he had, which some would argue contributed to his perpetual deceit, is exactly what has reared its head. The absence of forgiveness. He knew that ultimately, by acknowledging it, that he would never be forgiven and that it would be a lifetime ban. So if death, meaning a death sentence, is what you're fearing and you consider it to be a very real reality, even with admission, then what other way is there to turn? And then not only that, now we've learned over the course of time in terms of forgiveness. I'm an addict. Alcohol, drugs, whatever the case may be. America, land of second chances, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe he should have known it back then with Steve Howe and his 7-time drug offenses and all of this other stuff. But in the end, Pete Rose was fearful of the very predicament that he's now faced. And I would like to know from you, Jeremy, how would saying it's been 25 years, let's move on. He's 73 years old. You understand? How would acknowledging it in terms of reinstatement, allowing him to do something for the sport of baseball, because he's contributed to its success.
No doubt about that.
Right?
One of the greatest ambassadors the game has ever had.
I said, what would be...
And great for us.
How would
people like us.
How would the integrity of the sport be compromised if a commissioner was to extend a hand of forgiveness? I'd like to know the answer to that.
That's a very fair point. But as I said earlier, from Rob Manfred's perspective, or Bud Selig's as he's on the way out the door,
what's the benefit?
What do they have to gain? Now, even if it's that much, and I agree with you, as I said before, there's still a pretty effective deterrent here. If you're talking about you're going to be banned for 25 years, you're going to lose the opportunity to make millions and millions of dollars, you're going to lose your reputation, you're going to lose all of that, put them back in the game. But for baseball, It's a line in the sand. You don't cross it. William Cox, who owned, the Phillies in the 1940s, he was banned for life in 1943. He was never reinstated. The Black Sox were never reinstated. Now, I happen to believe that the steroid guys did more damage to baseball. That's arguable than Pete Rose. Because Pete Rose was betting on baseball. There's no evidence that influenced his decisions as a manager with the Reds. However, again, it gets very close. There were people threatening to burn down his house, to break his children's legs because he owed them money. You could see how that could very easily lead to the integrity of the game.
I can see that. But
just a quick point of order. For those who say, well, he just bet on his team, according again to the Dowd report, and I'm having to go with his findings.
Yep.
He didn't bet every day on his team, which would signal the inside gamblers, oh, you don't like your team today because you don't like the starting.
But again, what
happened with Paul Hornung.
But my problem with the position that we're all taking is that no one is refuting the facts. Even the innuendos supplementing the facts in terms of what he may have done. What we're saying is that it's been 25 years. Remember when Jim Gray interviewed him at the All-Star game, and you had players that turned against Jim Gray because they didn't appreciate him asking, when are you going to admit it, Pete Rose? You have people in the sport of baseball, players who feel adamant that he should be forgiven.
Look, I'll tell you the most remarkable thing, and I've known Pete for a long time. We went to Yankee Stadium. This must have been about 13, 14 years ago together. It was the first time he'd been back to Yankee Stadium since playing there in the 1976 World Series. And we sat, he couldn't, get tickets from the Yankees. They're not allowed to do anything like that. He was just there as a fan. We sat in the stands, and I sat facing home plate, and he sat facing the outfield. And he did something I've never seen anyone else in baseball do. He was able to tell me, based solely on the sound of the ball hitting the bat, where each ball was going. And he was right every time. He knows more about baseball. He knows more about the game. He knows more about the history. He loves it more than anybody else. And that's why this is inexcusable. Because if anyone had an appreciation for it, if anyone could tell you who Ty Cobb and Cap Anson and Napoleon Lajoie were, and Joe Jackson, it was Pete Rose.
But we also hear people sitting there, and after publicists and everybody else get involved, well, I have a sickness. So that he wasn't smart enough to do that.
No.
That's basically it. Because
he's always been defined.
That's right. So if he had stood up and said, I have a sickness, we're having a different discussion?
Okay, remember,
I think so.
He admitted he lied after 15 years or so to sell a book, right? Okay, and bottom line here, you realize by continuing to keep him out of baseball, if Rob Manfred goes forward, it keeps sending a strong message to clubhouses, look what could happen to you.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah. Jeremy, you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah. We keep talking about the deterrent effect, but that's what it's there for. That's why Pete Rose hasn't been embraced again by the game. But one thing when I spoke to Pete a few weeks ago that's important to bear in mind, he gets these mixed signals from baseball and the unfairness of that. All right, we want you at that celebration where Jim Gray interviewed him. We want you at the All-Star game next year in Cincinnati. You can come to the Joe Morgan ceremony, but you can't do this and you can't do that, and we can't give you tickets. If you're out, you're out. If you're in, you're in. And I can understand his frustration. Of course, he's also antagonized baseball consistently over the last 25 years, showing up in Cooperstown on induction weekend, signing autographs down the street. And I walked to that Pete Rose Hall of Fame or museum that they used to have there years ago. The first thing you see, it's not only signed copies of the Dowd Report, which you could argue is antagonistic enough. I mean, he's got his velour robes from Harrah's and the Trump Casino. He's got his VIP casino cards. That's who Pete is. And when you're saying reinstate him, I'm just curious, Stephen. Are you saying, all right, if the Reds want to hire him as their manager, that's okay with you?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying to completely ostracize him from a sport that you utilize, meaning Major League Baseball.
But so he can be a hitting coach?
I don't.
Listen, a minor league instructor?
Mark McGwire is a hitting coach. You know what I'm saying? I mean, all I'm trying to say to you is this. I understand that there are limits to what you should be able to give Pete Rose. But to give him a lifetime ban when we've let some of the people sully the name of this sport the way that it has been sullied, considering who he is and what he meant to the game. I never saw baseball give back any of the money they made off of this man. I never saw them give back anything that he's done for them. He did a lot for the national pastime. He truly did.
And it did a lot for him.
And he did a lot for him. And I get that. And again, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be punished. I'm saying it's 25 years, y'all. It's 25 years. That's my argument.
So he can be a goodwill ambassador for the Reds?
Listen, you know what? I don't know if I would go that far, but I'm just saying, Jeremy, for a man...
Because I've got no problem with that.
For a man to be completely ostracized from the sport where it's all you knew. You're growing up, you're playing baseball, whatever. That and gambling are the only, to our knowledge, are the only two things that we know that Pete Rose has ever known how to do. To take it away from him and to say you are not to be associated with this sport in any way after what he did as a player, wow.
One of the greatest ever.
Wow.
He's not starving. He's still making like $1 million a year on selling his name.
Right?
Yeah, and we get on him for that.
And I don't know if he'd
get on
be
him for that.
nearly as much if he were allowed in the game. I mean, he has the cachet as this black sheep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jeremy Schaap, thank you. Nothing black and white here, completely gray. Seahawks beat the Bears 34-6. Cutler was 12 for 20, 157 yards and 1 pick, while Wilson, that would be Russell, was 15 for 20. 202 yards, 3 total touchdowns, one of which was rushing. Watch the game. Lessons. Stephen A., what'd you learn after watching? I couldn't even get...
Boy, I got to tell you, man, I had a ball watching that first half. I sat up there, right? I'm sitting there. I come there midway through the first question. I just start laughing and stuff. I said, I literally wanted to, and you know this, I hardly ever call you. I almost called you on Friday night. I mean, it was beautiful, Skip. It was just beautiful to see. I said, I tried to warn him. I tried to tell this man. Yes. Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey dropping a touchdown pass. I know that wasn't Jay Cutler's fault, but I'm just looking at Jay Cutler and the poor Chicago Bears, and I was like, they are completely outclassed. This is an annihilation in a preseason game. 31-0 in the first half. Interception on the goal line. Jay Cutler, miscommunication with his offensive line. Next thing you know, gets the snap prematurely. What does he do? Compound the error by throwing an interception in the right corner right before the end of the first half. This is the Jay Cutler I know. Very Romo-esque, I might add. In the end, here's the bottom line, Skip Bayless. I understand that Seattle is an elite team. They seem to be in a class all by themselves. Russell Wilson just continues to grow and grow. I mean, Tillman, Briggs, and those boys look slow. Couldn't catch him. You understand? Even though they got him out of the pocket, and that's when he's most deadly at half the time, to be quite honest with you. But I'm just saying, I knew that the Legion of Boom, who watched this show, Skip, man. What's up, fellas? How y'all doing? They watched this show, Skip, and I knew they heard you talking about Jay Cutler, and I knew they heard me talking about what they were going to do to Jay Cutler. So I appreciate the Legion of Boom sitting there watching First Take and saying, you know what, Stephen A., we're going to look out for you, baby. We're going to shut Skip Bayless up with his Commodore friend of his, Jay Cutler, and his no.
I've never even met him. I never met the guy.
Your frenemy, enemy, whatever. This non-playoff producing self. I tried to tell you, Skip Bayless, but you wouldn't listen. All I'm trying to say to you is simple. Brandon Marshall can ball. His problem is that he got on the Cutler pom-poms. Alshon Jeffrey can ball. Martellus Bennett can ball. Matt Forte can ball. Hell, I'm even willing to go as far as to say Trestman can coach offensively, even though we don't know about him defensively. Yep. But in the end, if you got Jay Cutler as your quarterback, Skip, as far as I'm concerned, it's Cowboys Midwest. That's what it is. Just when things just seem to go right, don't you worry. Something wrong will transpire, and Jay Cutler will find a way to come up short. That is what happened. They got stomped. Your boy, you understand, Vanderbilt Commodore just ramrodded. It was really fun to watch, I must admit. I enjoyed it personally. I really did.
Are you sure?
What?
Mr. Chucklebox over there. Are you sure you watched this game?
Yeah.
I'm not sure you watched.
Why?
You know, you might have accidentally put in a tape of the Super Bowl and you got confused with Peyton Manning and Jay Cutler and you thought maybe that's what you're watching.
Why?
You know what? I saw Jay Cutler play pretty well. Silly me. Maybe I was watching the wrong game. But in a night game in Seattle against the Legion of Boom, I thought Jay Cutler fared far better than I saw Drew Brees fare last year, or Colin Kaepernick, or Peyton Manning the preseason before this one.
Before you continue with your soliloquy, don't misrepresent my point. I didn't say Jay Cutler played poorly. I said when
you were laughing at him. My Commodore friend.
Because I was trying to say, just stick around and wait. He'll mess up. Same thing with Romo. Just be patient. Romo passed for 500 yards. Relax. When I was watching the Denver-Dallas game last year, I was sitting there and I was watching it like this.
That's not the question.
That's
no,
what it
it's
is.
not the point.
Go ahead.
The point is that Jay Cutler against the feared Legion of Boom, early on, he goes bombs away to Alshon Jeffrey and hits him right in the hands with a deep touchdown pass. Can we see that
again? He
dropped it. He hit him right in the hand.
I didn't acknowledge that he dropped it.
This is a touchdown against the Legion of Boom.
That's it.
Boom!
I acknowledge
right in his hands.
That's right.
It's a touchdown.
That's right.
I mean, that's impressive because this unit doesn't give up many of those, especially at home at night.
That's right.
That crowd's going berserk.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, then
that was it.
Shortly thereafter, Jay Cutler throws what looked like was his second touchdown pass to Martellus Bennett.
Let's see.
And he gets caught at the half-yard line. Originally, they gave him a touchdown on this play.
But it wasn't a touchdown.
But
it wasn't a touchdown.
Okay, but it was close, man.
It wasn't a touchdown.
It was almost a touchdown. Look at this.
Okay,
wait. That could have been touchdown number 2. And by the way, this is in the first half against the Legion of Boom.
That's right.
That could have been 2 touchdown passes in the first half.
It's a touchdown. 2 touchdowns.
Wait.
Show the interception.
I'm not finished. No.
Next play.
No, it's not the next play. I'm not finished.
Go ahead.
Not finished.
Go ahead.
The next play.
2 plays later.
But the next play is another touchdown pass that gets nullified by the biggest phantom pass interference penalty, offensive pass interference on Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, what was
It's a touchdown. And they say, Brandon, you pushed. He didn't push anybody.
Bogus call.
What?
Bogus call.
Okay, there's another touchdown pass. So that's his third, but it's really just his second because they were at the half-yard line.
That's right.
But you got to give him that. So now, all of a sudden, we get pushback. It's because I'm reading from.
Could you show the interception now?
Wait a second. The snap hits him in the face. He's not ready for it.
Okay.
And he doesn't get a hold of the football. And I will be the first to admit.
Here it is.
Hit the interception.
All right. So he wins it in the fight.
Was his feet not planted?
It was a terrible throw.
Thank you.
Terrible idea.
And too experienced for him to make that mistake.
Okay.
Too experienced to make that mistake.
Jay Cutler effectively threw 2 touchdown passes in the first half against the Legion of Boom in Seattle. Show me someone else who has done that in the last 2 years.
Deontay, give us that.
Nobody.
Wait a minute.
Nobody does that.
Fair.
Okay, thank you.
Fair.
Way to go, Jay.
But what I'm trying to say to you is this. What did I say? I said to you that somehow, some way, they'll find a way. Because you see, you ignore the contagious effect that people like Cutler and Romo have on their team. You contaminate people, and what happens is, I'm talking about them. I'm saying them.
I did it.
They do it. What happens is, it could be a running back. It could be a receiver dropping passes. It could be a penalty. It could be anything. When the Cutlers and the Romos of the world do this.
Back to the point that I originally made, that the Bears are starting to resemble the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
It was, you were accurate about this, 31-0 at halftime. Why is that? The Bears' defense is horrible. It might be worse than it was a year ago from what I'm seeing in the preseason.
So you're willing to admit, let me pull a Skip Bayless here. So are you willing to say, is that your way of saying, Skip Bayless, that the Chicago Bears may not make the playoffs?
You don't sound like you're from Oklahoma.
You
sound like you're from New York City.
Are you saying?
And I do live in New York.
Are you saying that the Chicago Bears are not going to make the playoffs?
And the look.
I am leaning toward not. After I was leaning for a couple of months toward them winning this division. I put stock in the preseason, and I always say as we begin the preseason, I reserve the right to change as I see teams begin to take shape.
Very important.
Or not take shape.
Brandon Marshall will be moonlighting for a second job, flying to New York City to do Showtime, right? I was opposed to that. I have changed my mind. I have found the error of my ways. Brandon Marshall needs to be looking for another career because with the season they're about to have, because they're not very good, I would be looking for a second job myself.
You better be ready.
This is what's going to happen.
Well, the problem here is
I support Brandon Marshall flying to New York City. He need to stay in New York. Because Jay Cutler's going to get him killed.
If Cutler and Brandon Marshall could play both ways and they could both play safety, I might give him a chance, really. Cutler and Marshall. I mean,
Cutler.
Cutler. Let him play safety.
Cutler.
Yeah.
And Cutler
He's an athlete, man.
Go back to Vanderbilt. That's what he needs to do. Listen. Cutler's not going to do it, man. He's not going to do it for you, Skip. And he's got talent. I know Cutler. He's no scrub.
The offense is loaded. I'm not blaming the offense at all.
Scrub, but he will find a way. You can't make those kind of interceptions.
Did you see what Russell Wilson did to that defense? I thought they were going to miss Golden Tate. They don't miss Golden Tate. Not yet.
I just saw Russell Wilson looking like a far better quarterback.
All right. The Bears are Cowboys Midwest. Is that what we're saying now, Steve?
Excuse me?
The Bears are Cowboys Midwest.
Yes.
Okay, so admit it. Did Jay Cutler play pretty well in the first half on Friday night?
I wouldn't say pretty well. He was decent.
Decent?
No. He was decent.
2 touchdown passes against the Legion of Boom.
The interception took away from that. The interception took away from that.
All right, listen. So you now say they're not going to win the division. You're leaning.
I'm leaning, but we got a week. We got another week to go. I can reflect.
Listen. The Chicago Bears are in a world of trouble.
Defensively, not offensively.
Listen. That's all that matters.
They're going to score some points.
That's all that matters. They'll score points.
Yeah.
They'll also lose about 7 games.
Oh. All right, I'll give Jay Cutler this. Very proud of him for donating $15,000 to the Jackie Robinson West Little League.
Well, that's wonderful.
Very good.
I wish you would have told me that earlier. I wouldn't have been as hard on him.
Okay.
I wouldn't have been as hard on him. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know Jay Cutler. I didn't know. But I still don't think you're making the playoffs.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The new college football playoff.
The Seminoles have completed the perfect season.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
They questioned his work ethic when he entered the league, but praised his natural talents. But now they question his motivation. Michael Vick, the Jets' backup quarterback, told the Monday Morning Quarterback that at this stage of his career, he just wants to refresh and regroup. Monday Morning Quarterback also reported that some Jets coaches privately were disappointed that Vick wasn't, quote, more hell-bent on winning the starting job.
That's not true at all. You know, me and my coaches, we have great conversation. We have open dialogue, and that was far from the case. So whoever wrote that story, it was on the side of being very fictitious, and you got to come up with better stories than that. It's better things to talk about. I knew the entire time that Geno was going to be the starter, but Geno went out and proved that he's capable of running this team and putting this team in a position to win. So we just got to keep working and got to put ourselves in a position to win games now.
I like Michael Vick on camera now. Just shoot straight. Nothing different from what he wants to say. All things considered, Stephen, and I'll ask you this. Do you think that he actually handed the starting job to Geno?
I disagree with that. I think Michael Vick, I would never accuse him of handing the starting job to anybody. I think that's egregious. I think that speaks to his competitiveness or lack thereof. And I think it's going beyond the pale to accuse him of such a thing. But I do believe that if anybody's at fault, it's the New York Jets organization, because I think that a lot of people were in Vick's head. Yeah, you want him to go in there and compete, but at the same time, you want him to understand that it's Geno's job to lose and that you don't want to do anything to mess with Geno because Geno is the future. So Vick had to go in there and compete while also having to be a mentor and being protective of Geno Smith, because Vick understands that he's just the present in case of emergency, etc., whereas Geno was the future, unless there was a complete and total collapse on Geno's part, which we obviously did not see in the preseason. So if you go to Michael Vick and you put those stipulations not just on him figuratively, but literally where it permeates his psyche, then now you've got an issue. And I think that you create create scenarios where it looks as if, he's not going all out or he's not, vehemently competing for the job, Skip, or whatever the case may be, because the Jets put it in his head that we need you to come in here and work, but we primarily need you to be a mentor to Geno Smith. And that's a very complicated position for somebody with Vic's history to be in, because you got to remember, one of the things that Vic, could you imagine if Vic sat up there and was like this, I'm competing for the starting job, I think I'm the better man for the job. Could you imagine the things that would be said about him? We'd have we'd have animal rights activists coming out of the wazoo just to bring that up, to remind you of what kind of person he was. It has nothing to do with competing for a quarterback job, but they would use it as an excuse to attack him, and other people would use it as an excuse to try to impugn his professional integrity. And I think that having all of that in your mind, it can make you look a bit distracted, which could point the finger at some other things that people are saying.
All of which is why this whole story is baffling to me and conflicting to me. Because after the first couple of weeks of Michael Vick with the Jets, it seemed pretty clear to me that a stipulation of the Jets signing Michael Vick was simply that publicly you got to be a good soldier, man. You got to say all the right things about Geno Smith for all the reasons you just said.
Yep.
And it was a little frustrating to me because he was so PR, he was so PC, that after a while you're like, Michael, are you in there? Yeah. Is that you, Michael? Yeah. Come on now, have a little more public pride in yourself. But to your point, he did not walk in the door and say, look at my resume. Is it me or is it this kid? Come on, I'm way better than this kid. I don't know that it would have brought out the animal rights activists, but it would have brought out the back page headlines. And it would have put a lot of maybe undue pressure on young Geno, who did play well down the stretch last year after pretty much of a horrendous first, 3 quarters of the season. So, to me, Geno did respond at least to Michael Vick's presence, because the last couple of preseason games, Geno looked pretty good. I got to give him that. I'm not a big fan. I'm not sold long term, but he did win the job fair and square. And yet, I don't know where this story came from.
Yeah, who said what?
I don't know, and it always makes me a little uncomfortable because I'm not sure to whom I'm addressing this. Yeah. Did it come from Rex, or did it come from an assistant? Did it come from the assistant GM or the GM? Or I don't know. I don't know which. Did it come from a PR guy? I'm not sure. But again, it felt to me like Michael Vick's hands were publicly tied in a good way for Geno. Like I thought he was doing what he was instructed to do. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, that's what I got from it, and that's my point. And I think that, make no mistake about it, anything that points to Vic's professionalism or lack thereof is an excuse for people to touch on his character. Okay. And by touching on his character is going to further give them an excuse to bring up what he endured in the past. Because the belief is you need to be very, very appreciative of the fact that you have an NFL career right now. So, and you could see what he's saying. Vic's not even talking about Vic half the time.
Yeah.
Half the time, Vic is talking about, well, Geno did well, and I support him, and I got his back. And, I mean, half the time, more than 50% of the stuff coming out of his mouth isn't even about him. And that's how you know that, what the mandate was and what the obligation is. And it's just unfortunate that he wasn't placed in a position where he just gets to go out there and compete without worrying about a thing. Yeah. But that clearly was not the case.
Okay, but bottom line, when Michael did play quarterback for the Jets in preseason games, I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah, he was.
No, really. I thought I saw lots of flashes of the arm strength and the burst.
And I saw some throws that I wasn't overly impressed with too. So I'm not going to go that far. But he did look all right. And it definitely should have been a legitimate competition. But I think based on what we're hearing from him and what we're seeing, the competition was never legitimate. It was always Geno's job. And Mike was in there, look, here's $5 million.
Yeah.
Be a backup. Yeah. Say the right things.
Okay.
You're going to be all right.
All right, Geno.
All right.
The job is yours.
The job is yours.
God bless.
That particular play was a tough play, and he did go in there with his shoulder, but the way that Welk ended up trying to catch that ball, he went down, and the angle changed at the last second so that DJ kind of, the shoulder and the V of the neck hit Welker at the same time in the head. DJ was not trying to do any harm. He was trying to make the play and make the tackle, and I think that the call was correct, but it changed at the last second on him, and it was a tough play for him.
All right, on Saturday night, Peyton Manning received the first taunting penalty of his career after he got mad once DJ, as he just discussed, hit Wes Welker in the face with his shoulder. That was in the second quarter. 18-17 preseason win against the Broncos. You heard the coach there explaining what happened. Brian Dawkins joining us right now on whether or not the call was correct. Your take on it. I don't want to necessarily assume what your take on it is going to be, but whose side are you on?
First, before I get into that, I see now, sitting where I am, how a lot of players that have played the game in pads, when you put on suits, completely lose their mind as far as going against what is a legal hit, in my opinion. When you have a guy that plays as aggressive as he does, and I remember watching him at South Carolina, so he's a great player, physical, and what they did a lot with him in college even is allow him to patrol the short middle of the field to kind of set the tempo, so to speak, on hits. And when you look at the hit itself, he turned his shoulder. He ducked down his shoulder. It just so happened that Wes Welker is a shorter guy, and then he clips his helmet. Now, the rules are what they are of today, and I understand that because anytime that you hit a guy in the head, that's what the rules are at this point. But as a defender, I've always said this, it's so hard to hit a moving target properly, perfectly, every time. And I think another thing that's kind of going to get in with him is the fact that he's had a recent history of, I forget the tight end who he clipped his knee last year, I think in the preseason.
Is that Dustin Keller?
Was it Dustin Keller?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's kind of developing that kind of reputation a little bit. But the hit itself, in my humble opinion, was a perfect hit. You didn't dip your head, You used your shoulder. It just so happened to hit Wes where it hit him at.
The other thing about it, I don't think his hit last year should have anything to do with this one because last year was so low. Like, I thought, like, that's completely. I was actually proud that he hit Wes Welker the way that he hit him this time around because last year, I'm looking, it's a preseason game. You go directly at Dustin Keller's knee. Come on, man. I mean, it's a contemporary. You're playing this sport. You understand what it is, and you gonna sit there with a smile on your face after the game, saying, "Hey, they want us to go low. What you want me to do?" You know. And
okay, but that's the Ryan Clark argument. He kept asking last year, "What do you want us to do?"
But what I'm saying, I'm going like this. Skip. Here's the head. Here's the knee. You got all of this to go to. That's all I'm saying. To me, the hit this weekend was a perfect hit. It was the shoulder, and it wasn't with the crown. It wasn't with the helmet at all, let alone the crown of the helmet. And Wes Welker is short. Plus, he's a moving target. Plus, he's. I'm like, I don't understand what the motivation is outside of a defensive lineman in this day and age. I don't understand what would be the motivation for anybody aspiring to play in the NFL to be a defensive player. I don't see it. I don't see it anymore.
Listen, when you are what you just explained is the perfect scenario of why it's so difficult to be a defensive player. Because you're saying that the head is here, the body is there, but when a receiver ducks his head, it shrinks your strike zone, so to speak. A lot of people talk about these strike zones. It shrinks that target. So now I have aimed for that perfect strike zone. The receiver ducks. I've already committed to hitting him in that area. I can't then redirect myself even lower to make a lower hit. And if I go too low, what happens? You tear a guy's knee up, and then everybody's saying you shouldn't have tore his knee up. So what do you do as a defender? Do I run in there full speed and let it just hit him with my chest? I mean, I don't understand how to play the game anymore.
Brian, Skip. And I'll leave this to you, Skip. The NFL, we got the message. $765 million, judgment, settlement because even though that was appealed and there's more money to be divvied out. Look, we got the message. You don't hit people in the head. Certainly don't strike them with the crown of your helmet. Do what you get. I'm very proud of Swearingen's hit because I'm like, look, he didn't go low. And he didn't go high. He didn't try to decapitate the dude or anything like that. He tried to hit him with a solid, and what he kept doing? kept patting his shoulder, kept patting.
Yeah.
We got the message.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, the NFL needs to believe in its own product and its own rules and regulations. As you are policing this game, do you not see that people are getting the message? Is it all right for you? You want everybody, and I don't mean this, I'm not being, malicious or derogatory in any way. Do you want everybody walking around like Earl Campbell? Is that what you want? Where, you get your knees taken out from? That's what you want to see happen in the players? So, you're not going to get sued then because it's not going to be concussions. It's just injuries that come with the game. So you protect yourself, but not the people who represent the sport for you. They got to use some better judgment, man. They really, really do. Swearinger shouldn't even be fined. Shouldn't even be fined.
Quickly back to your opening statement.
Sure.
That some guys who are now wearing suits and not pads, expand on that a little bit. You're saying that they have lost sight of how difficult it is to play in pads on the defensive side.
Exactly.
Correct?
Because especially as a defensive player, I had to flip a different switch. I could not perform on the field as I am right now, in the calm state that I am. When I step on the football field, it's a different mindset. And so I'm in a different mode as far as contact is concerned. So to me, once you get off the football field, not for everybody. This is not for everybody.
And we're talking about analysts
But
here?
some guys, analysts, league office people who played the game, now look at the game and say, well, that's no place in the game for that type of stuff. When you actually did it yourself, that's where I'm talking about.
Okay. So, to your point, Wes Welker is as quick as anybody who's playing pro football. He makes his living with his quickness, right? So his neck and head quickness is just as quick as his feet are. So that ability to drop that head at the last split second is probably right there with anybody's ability to drop their head. So I made the point opening the show, we now have a rule that running backs cannot lead with their helmet. So to me, and you'll think this is like a real leap, but Wes Welker keeps putting his head in the line of fire. Well, maybe you should save Wes from himself by flagging Wes Welker and saying, Wes, you can't lead with your head like that, because he dropped it right into the forearm and the shoulder of Swearinger, who gets caught where he can't do anything. He's not aiming at the head. He's aiming at the strike zone, the middle of the strike zone, and at the last split second, Wes Welker's little head ducks right into the middle of the strike zone, boom. And Swearinger's saying, I can't play anymore. I can't do this any better than I just did it. I tried to do what you taught me to do, and he did it to me. I didn't do it to him. Yeah. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, to Wes's defense, if any time that if a guy's behind me and he flinches at me, the first thing that I'm going to do is protect myself by ducking my head down. That's a natural reaction. So if you're coming across the middle and at the corner of my eye, believe me, he sees those shadows coming. So his thing is I got to protect myself as I catch the ball. So he's going to lower his head. But that's why I put it on the onus of the NFL. Okay. That when I watch the film, if I see a defender who is using proper technique, lower the strike zone, using his shoulder, and the receiver then ducks his head, no fine.
Okay, so now put this in perspective. For the first time in Peyton Manning's career, he runs the length of the football field, about 40 yards, after he throws a touchdown pass on the following play to get in this young man's face, and he got a 15-yard flag for taunting. Your reaction to that?
I tweeted it right after it happened. I can dig it.
You can dig it.
I can dig it.
You liked it.
I can dig it. I understand. When it's in fast motion like that, you're not looking at what he hit the receiver with, and you understand who it is if you're Peyton Manning. This is Wes Welker, who missed, 4 games last year?
Yeah.
Really 4, because in that other game he didn't, to me he wasn't himself. So you're saying that you just hit this guy again, concussion-wise, and I can lose him for the first maybe 4 to 5 games. So I'm ticked off. And on top of that, throughout the week of practice, there was a lot of chirping going on as far as the defensive backs, Swearinger with those guys. And
he picked off Peyton in 11-11.
There you go. So there's a little bit of heat there as well.
But again, it seems like you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth, because you think it shouldn't have been a penalty. So why should Peyton then overreact and run the length of the field to get in the kid's face?
But again, he doesn't know that. When he threw the ball, all he saw was his receiver go down, and it looked to him particularly like he was led with his head. So he saw the flag come out, and he's like, there it is again. There you go again, hitting my guy. You've done some crazy stuff this week in practice. I'm not going to take this anymore, so I'm going to get in your face. And Swearinger didn't back down, but Payton didn't back down. But I think another thing it showed the team is like, listen, I'm all in. If I got to get 15-yard penalty for a guy doing that and I got to get in his face, I'm going to do it. That toughness thing.
Last 5 seconds of a preseason game in the first half?
He can dig it.
The what?
I mean, the timing of it all.
Oh.
Wasn't that big a deal.
Well, Payton said, the way Payton's mind works, he's thinking, oh, I can get away with this flag because there's only 5 seconds left in the half and it won't hurt us.
Yeah.
So even he was even one step ahead playing chess instead of checkers on getting a penalty. I can get this one because it won't hurt us.
It sort of takes away the point of, gutsy, blah, 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 blah. That's all
No,
I'm saying.
it's not so gutsy.
That's all I'm saying.
Gutsy. All right, listen. So moments before we went on air, I went to the commercial break, rather. I happened to go to DJ Swearinger's Instagram page. And the night that in question where he received the penalty, a lot of talk, he actually just posted something very simple. He said, I learned to hit from the best. And of the best, he referred to Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and B-Doc. And he just left it at that.
So it's my fault. You said
it's not necessarily your fault. I'm saying
but I have said, though, and when he came out of South Carolina, seeing him play, I loved his aggressiveness. I love the way he approached the game. And he plays with an energy to me that allows his teammates to feed off of it, and I always love guys like that, and I think he's going to be a good one.
Hashtag hard hitters.
I just hope he's not punished, because I think if he gets punished for that, it's going to encourage defenders to go lower, and you're going to have a lot of problems. Leave it alone. He should not be fined at all.
The league's most loaded division was on display over the weekend. The Seahawks crushed the Bears 34-6, but the other three teams should be concerned. Sam Bradford missing the season after tearing his left ACL in Saturday night's game against the Browns. The 49ers had their first win of the preseason, but again, their offense continued to struggle. The Cardinals' starting offense took a turn for the worse as well. Carson Palmer also struggling in the NFC West. So we're trying to break it down. How do you see this division shaking out? Brian Dawkins still here hanging out with us. Your take, sir.
For everybody that knows me knows that I love the X-Men, Wolverine. I love that. There's another character in there by the name of Juggernaut. And that's what I see the Seattle Seahawks being this year as far as this division is concerned. I had it closer together because I thought that once you get full off of the Super Bowl, there's a lot of opportunities to be distracted. Radio interviews, more opportunities for guys to go out and, better their brand, so to speak. But this team seems to be just as hungry as they were last year.
They got a lot of heart.
A lot of heart. And you see it. And you saw it, again, this past preseason game, this third one. And the third one, a lot of times, gives you a precursor for what could eventually happen during the regular season. So I had them winning the division in a close one. I see them winning this thing at least 3 games, separating them from the second team. Is when you get to those other second and third team is where, to me, you start to clunk things together. And I believe that the Cardinals, when you lose Dansby, when you lose Dockett, Tyrann Mathieu is coming back from an injury, so you don't know where he's going to be. Yes, they do have 2 excellent corners on the outside, but you don't know what your quarterback is going to do is the problem. I think the running game will be better. I think they do have 3 very capable receivers with John Brown coming along to add with Floyd and Fitzgerald outside. So I think that they'll be in the mix. When you talk about the 49ers, they concern me big time. Because like I just said, the third preseason game usually gives you a precursor because that's your dress rehearsal, so to speak. When you go out and stink it up like they continue to stink it up, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and you don't have your best defensive player, Alston and Bowman in the middle, that concerns me that they're going to try to make a late season push to earn that spot, and I don't know if they'll be able to do it. I don't see the Rams doing anything at this point. The defense will be good. I don't know if they'll have the capable enough quarterback to be able to score enough points to win enough games.
Seattle is clearly the class of the division. I think when we think about San Francisco, one of the things we may need to take into consideration is attrition and how that's worn on them. 3 consecutive NFC championship games, a Super Bowl berth as well, going up against it. Your time might be running out. in terms of that kind of run. You may have knocked on the door one too many times without being able to kick it down. I definitely think that's plausible. In Arizona, Carson Palmer, too inconsistent. He's a home run hitter. He's also a strikeout artist. That's how I look at him. And as a result of it, I could see the division being interesting, but that's only for the number 2 slot within the division. I think it's Seattle's division to lose. I think New Orleans has emerged as the number 1 threat to the Seattle Seahawks, and that's only assuming they can get home field advantage. If the road to the Super Bowl has to go through New Orleans, it would be very interesting to see how Seattle does in New Orleans rather than hosting a game on their home turf. Philadelphia is no joke either, and you know how I feel about that bad man that he is, Aaron Rodgers. But I am not sold on San Francisco and Arizona right now. San Francisco, because too many questions. When you got questions on your offensive line, at the same time the quarterback is still trying to grow into his own. You know, Bolden and those boys, you don't really have an athletic receiver, a Randy Moss or a Fitzgerald or somebody like that.
Except for Vernon Davis.
Yeah, well, Vernon Davis, as much as I like and respect his game, when you are neutralized the way he was neutralized by the Legion of Boom, I sort of lost something for you because, again, you're going to have to go through Seattle. Now, if Seattle was in the AFC...
Jimmy Graham's got to go through Seattle, too.
I know, well, Seattle might have to go through New Orleans, and that's what makes things...
I'm not sure about that.
I'm just saying they might.
Okay.
If they have to go through New Orleans, I don't think for 1 second that New Orleans would beat Seattle in Seattle. But if Seattle had to come through New Orleans and look at New Orleans' strength of schedule or lack thereof, I think things could get very, very interesting in the NFC, but not the NFC West.
How about the Alden Smith issue that's hanging over this team?
That's right.
So that's another big X factor.
Yeah.
And by the way, I got to ask you, who's Wolverine on the Seahawks? Is that what you're saying?
More importantly.
Yeah.
No, there's only one Wolverine.
So they...
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I like the way that they play, and that's why I named the team the Juggernaut.
Oh, they're the Juggernaut. I got it.
Yes.
I am so with you on Juggernaut. And I did not believe until these games started, but I've tried to tell Stephen A. I do put a lot of stock in the preseason, especially this dress rehearsal. So in back-to-back weeks now, we have seen Seattle do what it did last preseason. They did a 41-14 number on the Chargers, and then a 34-6 on the Bears, which included 31-0 at halftime. And I thought the Bears were pretty good, and they were completely, utterly outclassed. Their defense was against Seattle's offense. And I always doubted Seattle's offense last year, I think rightfully so. Yeah. And now Russell Wilson is playing some of the best quarterback in the NFL. And just when I thought they would miss Golden Tate, all of a sudden Jermaine Kearse looks like Golden Tate. And all of a sudden Percy Harvin is devastatingly healthy for this moment. Now, will it last? I don't know. But we remember when we had Michael Robinson on at the ESPY during the ESPY week.
Yes.
And he made the case that without him in the locker room, without Red Bryant in the locker room, without Chris Clemens in the locker room, both of those guys are now with Gus Bradley in Jacksonville as 2 new cornerstones for him, or older new cornerstones, that a lot of leadership has been lost from that locker room. Maybe not as much pass rush. Well, maybe the defense won't have as much leadership. Maybe there won't be quite as high a level of pass rush as we saw against Peyton Manning. But the offense is going to take up some slack because they are hitting on every cylinder. They are the juggernaut right now, as offensively they are destroying people with the other side of the ball. Now it's not a fair fight anymore. So this division, I'm declaring it today, it's over. It's over. I mean, they could win by 4 games.
I agree with you.
Now, last year, when we mentioned offense, what was the first thing you probably would think about? I know I would think about the running attack. Against the Chicago Bears, they went shotgun. They did boots. He did what he does out of the pocket.
I don't count that, B-Dog. I don't count that because Chicago's defense is awful right now. Tillman looked slow. Briggs didn't look like himself. Not to mention Trestman. They have done a complete 180 in Chicago. It was all about defense under Lovey, and the offense was challenged. And it's almost like they sold their soul to offense, and they have ignored defense. That's what it seems like.
This is my philosophy when it comes to that. If you are in front or you're playing against somebody that's not supposed to be in front of you, it should look like it. And yesterday, it looked like it. The team that was the better team on the offensive side of the ball was Seattle, and they flat out and totally proved it. that they
Can I
were
just
better.
sum this up with Russell Wilson's numbers for the preseason? 30 of 39
Crazy.
for 360 yards, and he's rushed for 61 yards and 3 touchdowns and thrown 0 interceptions. I mean, he's had a season in the preseason.
And he's gotten hit one time.
Yep.
And he's gotten a little bigger.
Maybe.
He's gotten
not taller, maybe, but
a little bigger.
The start of the NFL regular season is almost here, but first is week 4 of the preseason. By now, teams have likely proven themselves, or maybe they haven't. And as we head into the final week of the preseason, jobs will be won or they will be lost. So who has been the best team so far? Stephen A. Smith, let's break it down.
Well, so far it looks like the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos on a collision course for a repeat, but I'm not believing that that's going to happen. I think both have a chance to get knocked off. I think New Orleans has a shot to knock off Seattle in the event that...
You're being bold about that, man.
In the event
You're bullish on the Saints now.
If they're at home.
Okay.
If they're at home. And I think that New England has a legitimate shot to knock off Denver. I'm not sold on Denver because I think Denver's soft. That's what I get from them. And they're going to have to show me it's not about skill. We know they can play. It's certainly not about Peyton Manning. We know he's one of the greatest. And I think Monty Ball is going to be an upgrade from Knowshon Moreno.
Do you really? That's a mouthful.
I do believe that. I do believe, and there's no knock against Moreno, but I like Ball. And I think that when you look at Julius or Demaryius Thomas, I think when you look at a Wes Welker, assuming that he's going to recover from those concussions and what they're having to prove, and obviously the losses that they suffered on the offensive line, it's back intact, and I think Peyton Manning will be even more protected, won't be coming across like he's throwing in a phone booth. I think the combination of all of those things makes Denver formidable, but the problem is that if you put a hat on them, they appear to be easily rattled. And I don't have faith that you're going to be able to withstand that for the entire season. It'll happen during the regular season, but I can see the playoffs, them fumbling the way that they did against Baltimore a couple of years back. And I could see New England representing the AFC in the Super Bowl before I see Denver.
Well, thank you very much, which is why the New England Patriots are on a collision course with the Seattle Seahawks for this year's Super Bowl.
And that will not be the same kind of Super Bowl that we saw last year.
By the way, did you notice that my Patriots just cut America's team?
America's
point
team.
Out, just cut Will Smith and Tommy Kelly from their defensive line rotation. What does that tell you about how deep they are? They might be able to re-sign one back, maybe want to wait for a while. But this team is loaded in the defensive line. With Revis and Browner, it's now loaded in the secondary. Its secondary will at least rival Seattle's. And all of a sudden, it's like Gronkowski's going to be gravy for the best quarterback in pro football, who is Tom Brady, who's still operating as the because you added Brandon LaFell to Kenbrell Tompkins, who gets better by the snap. And listen, Edelman and Amendola, serious. They're really good. They are killing people.
They are very good, but durability is a question with Amendola. I don't think he's going to last. Edelman will, though.
I don't know.
You're bullish on Amendola.
I'm bullish because this will be his year. It took him a while to figure it all out. This year, he's got it figured out, and he knows his place.
Amendola?
Yeah.
I mean, when he gets knocked upside his head, how you going to figure it out?
About that.
When stuff is swirling around in your head, how's that going to help you?
Well, New England's going to be swirling around all over.
You love hard. He appreciates it. Danny, shout out to you. We're done.
Seattle in the NFC.
Forrest Bayless.
With Dallas a close second.
And Stephen A. Smith.
I'm kidding.
Thank you for the joke to